All right, and welcome back to the Paraglider Show. This is David and Gabriel. We're hosting the show this morning live, and again, want to encourage any of you that may be listening worldwide to give us a call. In North America's toll-free line is 1-888-514-2100. The international line is 001-858-268-3068. And we're going to go on with the next segment here, talking about paraglider landings. And
let's remind them also that you guys can use the MSN Messenger service. Yeah, and I only got the Messenger going this morning. That is FlyGuyGJ, like Gabriel Jebb, at msn.net. So if you guys if you're a little bit phone shy, or maybe it's a big bill to give us a call here in the States, then you can also send us an email with any questions or comments you might have.
Okay, and yeah, use that. It's handy. It's kind of nice too to be able to set up here and take messages. I can talk and Gabriel can type, and so between the two of us, we can be almost dynamic. And we're having fun. Actually, if you go to the World Talk Radio website, you can see the two most beautiful, handsome-looking guys sitting in studio right now, live talking paragliding. So that's a new function, and it won't be long.
I'm looking at porno on the internet, actually. But,
it won't be long before we'll be able to get a chalkboard up here and actually do some discussions with theory and with pictures. And so we've got a lot of big plans here with World Talk Radio. I mean, these guys are just first class. They're really taking care of us, and God bless every one of them. They're just doing a great job, and especially we have to thank Mr. Michael Purdy, the CEO of World Talk and the founder, and this guy is a dynamic whiz kid behind all this, and also, interestingly enough, a paraglider pilot as well as a motorhead. So we love him, and we want to thank Mike for making all this happen. And it's exciting. Okay, so we're talking landing. One of the things that I recently came up with looking at the newest issue of the Hang Gliding Paragliding magazine, in the May issue, they came out with the statistic looking at paragliding accidents, and they came up with the statistic that this year, in 2002, they statistically showed that about 28% of all the paragliding accidents happened on landing, and I thought that was kind of it's actually a very high percentage of.
Although that's not higher than it's been in the past. I think that's
no, it's roughly been about the same every year. Between 30 and 40% year after year. In fact, the study actually went back a couple years. You could watch, and it did vary a little bit, but it was consistently always one of the big problem areas in flying was this landing accident ratio. And I thought perhaps 1998 it was 45%. In 99, 39%, 2000, 25%, 2001, 38%, and this past 2002, 28%. So you can see, statistically, paragliding landings have probably been the major, at least the highest incident of crash landings and so on. So we thought we'd probably talk a little bit about that. Also, interestingly enough, if you look at general aviation, their research and studies show that the most mid-air collisions at non-towered airports occur on base and final when making aircraft landing approaches. So
really,
yeah. So their numbers.
So they've got the same problem we did. The students don't look before they turn; they just start turning, and that's it.
Right. There's a lot of interesting data on that. But anyway, I thought it would be something that we could talk about. And certainly, if any of you want to email Gabriel while we're talking with some ideas or comments, feel free to. Again, Gabriel, maybe you can give out that live address.
It's FlyGuyGJ at msn. I think it's .net. .com, something like that.
Okay, and so a couple things that I thought we could maybe go into, and one of the things that we find is on landings, the setup for the landing is a very, very important and critical factor.
That's why we got the piece of paper.
Okay, let me just see here.
We got a phone call here.
Yeah, we're
just trying to figure out how to use this. My dad's on the controls again.
Well, somehow we're locked up here, but let me just see if I can.
We're probably not locked up. The computer's not locked up, that's for sure.
Yeah, no.
One of us is locked up.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Okay, we'll get to it. Just keep talking, and I'll see what I can do here. Okay. And this is David. Who do we have on the line?
It could well be me.
It could well be. All right. Well, hey, this is a surprise. And we have a gentleman by the name of Murray Hayes from Scotland. And how you doing, Murray?
Not bad at all. I think you might find it's .com. There's a couple of lads that are on the MSN who I can chat to at the moment, and none of us can see you up on there yet.
Really?
I want to double check. It's you. The MSN Messenger is usually msn.com.
Right. Okay. You know, it's been a while since I've used this, to tell you the truth. So.
Now I'm just having a look, see whether we've got Fly Guy up here.
You know, it says .net right here. I don't know.
Okay, well I'll try it on that and we'll see if it's working. So we're going to go for add a contact, and we will find out whether it's working. So FLY.
Alright.
GJ at msn.net.
Yeah.
Now, when I tried that a second ago, it said that it does not exist.
Oops.
It's still saying that.
Really? You know, we didn't use this for a while, and I'm just thinking that maybe they shut it down on us. Either case,
Murray, you might, if your computer's on a little bit loud, we can hear a lot of background noise. You might want to turn that down just a wee bit. And you'll come across a little bit cleaner.
I don't know. Can you hear anything at all?
We were just hearing a little bit of static or scratch or.
So Murray, you've got some ideas for us on landing approaches, yeah?
Well, in the UK, they've sort of changed their approach. The official view now is that they do what is called a constant aspect approach.
Right.
So instead of doing a proper aviation circuit up high, they do a long curving approach in. And the main reason, though, behind that, which is why I strongly object to it, is that it's not the problem they're trying to cure. Now, the reason they're doing it is, they say, because there's too many landing accidents. But the problem is that people turning at low level are crashing.
Right.
So it's not the actual fact they're landing, it's the fact that they can't turn in a controlled manner.
Right. Okay, I'm following you. So
instead of just learning to fly properly,
right,
what they're doing is they're introducing a procedure which removes doing a turn at a low level, rather than increasing the training standard so you can turn at any level. Now, our approach for landings, you come over at several hundred feet if you can above the field, and you do a rectangular pattern. And the reason for doing a rectangular pattern is that if you're following a ground feature, it's very easy to assess your drift on the 4 segments as you go down.
Right.
Flying both a positive and a negative track, i.e. both sides of a square or the rectangle, allows you to clearly assess the wind strength via the difference in ground speed.
Right.
On your second circuit, you probably then do a square circuit at the, now let's get this right, at the downwind end of the landing field, if necessary, followed by a couple of figure of eights low level, and then into the centre of field, giving you plenty of overshoot, plenty of undershoot, and plenty for any change in gusts.
Right.
So there seems to be a trend, I'm not sure about the States, but certainly over in Europe, there seems to be a trend to say, well, we have a problem, so what we'll do is change the equipment or change a procedure without looking for the root cause of the problem.
You don't find yourself naturally doing basically the big U-turn at the end of it anyways?
No.
No? You always do the downwind base final?
I will always, where possible, depending on the height I've got, I'll always start off doing a proper aviation approach, proper circuit, then I'll transit into a square circuit, then figure of eights. And then what I usually is I'll degrade my glide angle by bringing on to the so-called minimum sink, which allows you then to easily speed up or slow down to correct any slight alterations in the wind as you come in on your final approach. And Paragliding Radio Show has just signed in.
Yeah, I just figured it out. We were at the net instead of the column.
Yep, so everybody will see you online now.
Cool. So Murray, and is do you teach any other methods of doing the landing approach?
Lots of alternatives. One of the things that we'll try and do is, there are occasions when you'll be coming into land and suddenly you'll find you've got crosswind. And again, the tendency there is for folks to start panicking, start to slam on the brakes, start to slow down, because they've got high ground speed drift appearing. Also, if you've been flying above a valley on a ridge lift, when you come down to bottom land in the valley, suddenly the wind can switch 90 degrees either from the left or the right, because the airflow in the bottom of the valley is going along the valley rather than the prevailing ridge lift you've been flying. So again, we train for downwind landings in a nice flat, safe area. The key being, keep on your airspeed, keep control of the glider, use the energy that the glider has.
Perfect. Murray, I agree with you in a way, but I got to say, I usually teach several different methods or several different variations on a couple of methods.
Yeah. The more alternatives people have, the better.
Right. The I also, though, I've found that I usually now do kind of a hook turn approach. Which I was under the impression that would just be sort of a natural progression from the standard aviation approach.
But now, Gabriel, you primarily...
Wind.
What's that?
So from a base legs straight into wind.
Pretty much, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But again, you tend to use that more in a lower wind condition where you're lower to the ground. Do you not? You don't usually use that technique when you're 500 feet, a couple hundred feet over.
No, because then I'm usually doing like wing overs and stuff like that.
Yeah, the fun stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
The things we don't like.
I'm like, then I'm doing what we shouldn't be. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe just to help clarify for some of our people that may be listening, this rectangular approach that Murray's talking about is oftentimes called the aircraft approach, and it usually involves making two 90-degree turns, changing your heading twice, 90 degrees, and usually these turns are usually done where you have a lot more elevation between you and the ground, as a general rule. And so one of the things that we term as a button hook landing, oftentimes when a pilot is very, very low and he's coming in into land, oftentimes he will drift back 45 degrees and hook into the wind, and just at about the time he hooks into the wind, he sets his feet down with a full flare. That's a shallow approach type configuration or landing that we oftentimes will teach. And then the other approach is an approach that many students use. It's called the figure eight approach, where at any height the student doesn't lose eye contact with the target and he's not flying downwind. He just simply goes back and forth in a figure eight motion, and then the last remaining turning straight into the wind and landing, and that usually done at a little bit of altitude, so that when you turn into the wind, you still have plenty of time to slow down and flare.
Effectively, what we do is the combination of the three. Depending on your approach height, you've got your standard rectangle, then going to square, then figure of eight, and then J hook, as you would describe it. And obviously, the lower you are as you approach your landing, then the further down the list you start off with.
Right.
One of the very, very handy things that we like showing folks to do is actually doing the final turn, what you'd be doing your J turn, but leaving roll in. So if you have a crosswind or if you're going into a slope landing, actually landing with the glider rolled over on the interwind side. That way, as soon as your feet touch down, the glider's not rolling downwind, and you see the quite common occurrence of pilots being dragged along.
So it just sort of, it can collapse in front of you, or it can...
well, it's more you're rolling it
pull it down from there.
Into wind side,
right.
And your feet are dead stop, and if anything, you're stepping back into wind and then collapsing it.
Mm-hmm.
But you see a lot of pilots, particularly low airtime pilots, with a situation where they're having to land with a certain amount of crosswind. As soon as they've touched down, the glider's starting to roll on the downwind side of them, and then they're getting dragged.
Well, there's a couple reasons why, obviously, we try to teach this aircraft landing approach, or as you call it, the rectangular approach. One of the reasons is that your turns are generally minimized near the ground. In other words, you can set up with a little bit higher elevation, and you can adjust your landing position by varying the length of your run and the turns, which is good. And the other reason for this type of landing training is that you minimize your turns. You tend to, especially in turbulence, reduce the chances for partial deflations or inflations.
The turns are well separated rather than continuous.
So again, it becomes pretty much the standard landing approach in most forms of aviation, and certainly one that we use and use wisely in paragliding. And it should be perfected as best as one can for the obvious reasons of safety.
You know, I think the and I'm just playing devil's advocate because, like I was saying earlier, that I'm not particularly keen on it. I think the reason that I'm not is because, you know, when I've flown in a sailplane, you got the little hatch marks on the side. Right. You do the standard, you do the whatever we're going to call it, the aviation or the rectangular approach. Because
I would call it aviation as well.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to do the aviation approach because then you can use the hatch marks on the cockpit and whatever point you're trying to land at, and you can measure the angles, and that's the whole reason that skydivers do it, why aviators do it, because you know that when you're at a 45-degree angle, that you've got, you know, a 2-to-1 glide, and you know that when you're at a 30-degree angle, you've got a 3-to-1 glide, and so they're using it to be able to gauge where they have to make their turn.
It gives it consistency.
Right. As a paragliding pilot, though, see, we don't have that, and I've tried a lot with our students in terms of just, you know, putting marks on the side of the risers or something like that. And okay, when this is at a 45 to where you want to land at, this is where you have to be, you know, halfway through the downwind leg. And the problem is that it's very, very difficult to tell if you don't have
perception.
Yeah.
Murray, could one put etch marks on its sunglasses to determine?
Well, with the visored helmets that I've got, in theory, I suppose you could use them for that. But I must admit, it's not something I've ever had a problem with, so it's something I'll probably have to give a bit of thought to. One other thing we tend to mention is that as the standard aviation approach is actually left-hand circuits, unless there's a local obvious reason for otherwise, we would always do a left-hand circuit to landing, because that way anyone else coming into land that flies with the club will also be doing a left-hand circuit.
Okay. The and that's everybody in the UK, or is that just what you guys are doing?
Left-hand circuits are standard in aviation all over the world. There are some airports, like at Dundee Airport, when the wind direction changes, there's no flying on the dead side. You're not like to fly over the town below 2,000 feet.
Right.
So when we have an easterly, it's a right-hand circuit.
Right.
But the conventional left-hand circuit is standard pretty well worldwide.
Okay, and so that's why you're pointing it out. Is what you're saying.
It's a handy thing for paraglider pilots. If you're going to choose one or the other, you might as well do something that's aviation standard.
Unfortunately, most of the paraglider pilots do it the way that they would drive their car. You know, and that's I think that's one area that might be a bit confusing.
Well, what I want to try to do is break down. We could start off with the aircraft approach, but let's break down some of the segments and maybe talk a little bit about the do's and don'ts and how can we make landing a safer event. And again, one of the things we just brought out is that we try to avoid turning very close to the ground. We try to avoid, having your glider banked, which makes it sometimes a little bit more susceptible to deflations in turbulence and that type of thing. Certainly, if you got any other ideas, Murray or Gabriel, let's throw them out there and get them on the table.
One of the key things would be if you have a very nice day that's soarable and you've got nothing better to do, practice landings on the slope, practice landings on the top.
Yeah.
Because most pilots would tend to do one landing a day, and then they pack up, they can't be bothered walking back.
Right.
If the lift's not fantastic, and you've got a small knoll part of the way down the hill, take off, do a 5-minute flight, do a spot landing onto that point, and you've only got a couple of minute walk back up.
Right.
Do pilots do enough landings?
Absolutely, and I mean that's something in all of aviation that everybody practices except for us is
Touch
landing.
And goes.
Yeah. So I would agree.
I'll go out and do sort of 100 flights in a day.
Well, Gabriel, you brought up an interesting point because, unlike the sailplanes where you have the etchings in the canopy cockpit, what we do is all by feel and by just doing it over and over again, and in your mind you just naturally know where you have to set up for your turns and so on. That's the hard and difficult thing about trying to convey this kind of information to a student, because oftentimes it's just a process of doing it over and over and over again, and there's no easy way to really
bring out the old favorite dual control tandem.
Right.
Because you've got them on the controls all the way down to the spot landing, but at any point you can override, either to assist their control or literally to disconnect their controls.
The one thing though that I do notice with all pilots, and this might go to the tandem a little bit too, is that a lot of wings have different glides, and I think we also measure angles just subconsciously in our head, Dad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's why a lot overshooting, are overshooting, their first day or their first couple of weeks on a new wing, or undershooting, because they're just not used to the amount of.
Right.
It's a very good point. I mean, I just recently had a new pair of glasses made, and although the prescription is the same, the depth perception's changed by about 4 inches over my height of sort of 6 feet. And I notice any time I change my glasses, I'm misjudging my landings by a couple of inches.
Right. We're going to take a break, Murray.
Yep.
So we're going to be right back in a couple of minutes. And this is the Paraglider Radio Talk Show.
Long break, if you want.
Oh, this is a long break. Murray, you want to hang on, or you want to?
I'll phone back in 5.
Okay, sounds good.
That's okay.
Okay. Talk to you later.
See what happens.